So crime in South Africa continues to be a pandemic, as some have described it, and it's even more worrying when it's inflicted on the most vulnerable, including the elderly. Just recently, we reported about an elderly person who was hacked to death, allegedly by her own son in Limpopo. Full View anchor Bongiwe Zwane is out in Soweto tonight to speak to the country's eldest citizens about how safe they feel, Bongiwe, in a country that feels, for most of us, as though it's getting or becoming increasingly dangerous.
A very good evening to you, Tembegile, and the viewers. Yes, and speaking to some of the elderly here in Diepkloof in Soweto, we are actually at Tusalushaka. This is where they, will be getting some meals and a place where they can be able to at least find some company and a bit of comfort from what they're going through. Because when we were speaking to some of them off air, they were telling us that, in fact, what they do on a daily basis, they live with their doors locked, the gates locked, because they do not want to be affected by crime in the area, because they have seen some of their counterparts around this particular area actually being victim to crime. And just before I speak to some of the elderly people who are joining us this evening, Tembegile, I'd like us to go to the Northwest, right? And this is where we find this report by Debucho Pakedi, our colleague there, who is actually looking at the plight of the elderly. And this is at the Omolemo Care Center. This is a support center that is in Mahikeng in the Northwest, and they're trying to locate a family of one of the elderly men there who has been victim repeatedly of crime and abuse and neglect. And they say that it is this neglect and abuse that is actually making a lot of elder, people vulnerable to incidents of crime. So let's take a look at this report just before we get into the conversation here.
This 77-year-old stays alone. Destitute and living in deplorable conditions, he has become an easy prey to criminals. He says thieves broke into his house and stole his valuables.
They broke into my house with guns. They found me very alone and vulnerable. I couldn't do anything. They took my cell phone, cards, ID, and money.
The Omolemo Care and Support Center has been assisting him, making sure he doesn't go to bed on an empty stomach. Their aim, to help restore his dignity.
His life is very, very difficult because he don't have even an ID, even his social grant. I'm trying my best to help him to get his old age grant back now. And we are trying to get him an identity book because he said that thieves arrived his place and took everything from him. Now he don't have nothing. He's staying in a helpless situation.
She says they need a motivation letter from the Department of Social Development to move him to an old age home.
Now I'm still looking for help from Department of Social Development. Since from last year, social worker promised me to come to assess the place and also to come to make me a motivation letter. Since now, she didn't come.
Residents are equally worried about the well-being of the neglected elderly in the area.
We are worried about all the elderlies neglected or staying alone. What are we going to do, especially when they don't have families?
To
see the elderly struggling and staying alone is very worrying. It's a big challenge. No one takes care of them or collects their grant on their behalf. The grant they collect for themselves is often stolen from them.
The Department of Social Development has promised to intervene.
We have been made aware of the plight of an elderly person who is in need of care and protection in this area. As part of our quick intervention, we have taken a decision as a department to place an elderly person in one of the old age homes in this area. We are also liaising with our counterparts in Ramotsrimira local municipality to help us in tracing the family members of this elderly person. We are also liaising with Home Affairs to ensure that they reissue an ID for this elderly person. And also we condemn any form of abuse, any form of violence against elderly people in this province. It is for this reason, as a department, that we have provided funding to most of the MPOs in the province to ensure that they provide services to older persons.
According to the NGO, Many people do not send their elderly family members to old age homes, fearing abandonment or loss of social grant income.
They think when they report or they came to ask for help for staying at orphanage place, they think maybe the old age grant is going to be cut because they misuse it. And other thing in our village, most of people, they're afraid to take their parents to the orphanage, old orphanage, because they think, or when they take them to orphanage place, they think they neglecting them. But the most of time, I encourage them to take their parents to all orphanage place than to leave them alone.
The center has pleaded with communities and families to look after the elderly so they do not fall victim to crime. Deborah Pakedi, SABC News, Mahikeng.
That report there by SABC News reporter Deborah Pakedi, painting a grim picture of one elderly person in the province of the Northwest. Now, when you look at the Older Persons Act, right, and this is an act that is intended to promote as well as protect the rights of the older persons, and it describes older persons as men who are over the age of 65 and women who are over the age of 60. But one of the things that you see in some of these communities, as we saw in that one insert by Debukhode, is that abuse is rife in some of the communities, but also at the same time, we do see elderly people also falling victim to crime. So I'm going to bring them in as we start this conversation. Sanbonan ngiyabonga kakhulu isikhatseni. Gogo angiqale ngawe. Ngicela ukuthi uqale nje uzisho ukuthi ugogo ubani?
Ugogo umita Madida ezone 1 Deep Group.
Gogo Madida, ubugebengu bunjani la ukhona?
Lapha kule Sethi Street kusengcono bantu abami kusathulile. Asikakaboni izinto ezimbi la kule street.
Manizwa nhlanenizwa ini kodwa?
Itsizwa nje bayiculela abantwana bagijima ebusuku ngoba abantwana bahamba ebusuku abantwana.
Baba, igama?
Michael.
Siema.
Yes.
But Michael, when you look at indaba ye crime nabantu abadala, yini into oyibonayo kakhulu esikhathini esiningi?
No, crime la idiphlufula. Iningi. Iningi la ukuthi isikhathi eside banokungenelela abantu ngaphakathi eJardina ngithi ngisenza amabonda amakhulu. Mabangenile ababo asiboni thina bomakhelwane ukuthi kwenzakalana ngaphakathi. So bazenzele the way benza ngakhona bathathe amakhathi wethu izinto ezinjalo. So ngoba yithi abantu abadala ezindlini abantwana bona bazihambela bazela khona, then bona abantu bas-attack khona lapho. Yeah.
Ngizoza kuwe mama, ngizocela ukuthi uqale ngokuthi usazise ukuthi ubani igama nokuthi wena njengoba echaza ubaba ukuthi ubugebengu kwesinye isikhathi ubuye bekhona, uthola ukuthi mhlambe ubonda lude, and ubonda njengoba lude abantu abakwazi ukubona ngaphakathi mawuzama ukuthola usizo. Umuntu omdala uwedwa uthi bake banithathele namakhadi esasa.
Igama lami uLindiwe Nkosi. Ngibona icrime ibhlungu ebantwini abadala, kodwa sizamile ukuthi sihlale sinama whistle ukuthi makhona okwenzakalayo ushaye whistle, but nje so far yona ibhlungu kakhulu, especially mabasemholweni ila sibona khona ukuthi abekho safe. Yabo. So
futhi kakhulu wena ngoba umuntu onakekela umuntu omdala, umuntu angazibuza ukuthi njengoba umuntu onakekela umuntu omdala kuba kanjani, ngizomiyeka kancane nje ukuthi okay baba, kuba kanjani mhlambe njengokuthi wena unakekela umuntu omdala isikhathi sokhola niyamphelezela nenze njani?
Ekseni siyamphelekezela ngijike ekhoneni, but so far la eDeep Square la baholela khona kungconywana, isecurity ikhona because makabuya ubuya ngeUber. Yabo kusase safe nyani ithi ngisho kanjalo. Ya sikakezwe kubhlungu noma bebathathela boni imali ema ATM wabogogo ngoba ugogo angithi ubusy la bese qhamuka umuntu wangalindelanga amthathe, but nje so far kusasengconywana kakhulu.
Mama Gladys, wena umuntu oqale ukuthi kube nendawo yokuthi abantu abadala bakwazi ukuthi bafike la bazokwazi ukuthola ukudla, kodwa kwesinye isikhathi bakwazi nokuthi ukuthola ukuvikeleka. Asikhulume ngobugebengu uma uhleli nabo bake bakutshele nje ukuthi yini eyenzekayo.
Baye bakhulume bona abantu abadala kakhulu okunye esikushiya esingakukhulumila abantwana abahlala nabo gogo okanye nabomkhulu laba abagada ukuthi uma ugogo efika nje ekhaya omunye wabo uzofuna ukuthatha le mali ngenkani abanye bayashaya bogogo uyayibona into enjalo and-ke manje-ke abogogo abantu abafihlayo abasabayo ukukhuluma ukuthi kwenzakalani bayakhuluma nje la isenta kodwa uma ungathi kuye gogo kulungile-ke masiye ku-social work yabona or isemaphoyiseni uzovuma ugogo ukuthi hayi masambe mase kufika lolo langa or leso sikhathi leso sokuthi nihambe niye khona uzojika ugogo athi hayi cha sesiyilungisile ekhaya lento le ayisahluphi ukubonakalisa nje ukuthi bayayisaba
mhlawumbe usuka saba lo muntu ahlala naye lapha endlini ukuthi mayengahamba ayomceba uzomjikela
usaba lokho ugogo ngoba mengahamba ayomceba is either uzomshaya uyabona abanye abogogo nkosiyami baze bakhishwe emakhaya bakithi utho ukuthi abanye abogogo bayathathwa bamukiswe emahome umntwana umzukulu afuna ukuthi akhonye la ekhaya likagogo abanye baze bawathengisa nalamakhaya wabogogo inhlupheko abakuyo bogogo abanye bogogo bashiywa nezingane ezincane bakithi umntana azale afika dampe ashiye aphuma hambi akashiya ngakhadi akashiya ngalutho gogo asogole ke manje ukuthi athole ikhadi lekliniki okanye uyabona umholo womntwana
And some of what is being said here tonight for the benefit of some of our viewers is that as we speak about the challenges that they're going through, you listen to Ubab Mike and he talks about the fact that they do have high walls. And I've seen them in some of their homes. They've got high walls and some of these high walls can also be, while they are a deterrent to criminals, but at the same time, if you are within those high walls, it's difficult for you to scream for help. And you may find that these some young people do come in there, some of the criminals, and steal whatever they can, and it becomes too late before somebody can actually come and be able to rescue or to help you out. At the same time, Ukok Madita is saying their street is relatively safe, so at least they are still able to have a little bit of reprieve. And then you also hear that because there's a shopping center that's not far from where we are, which is where they would normally go to be able to collect their grants, their social grants, and there is a little bit of security, but the challenge is also at the ATMs, where then you find that an elderly person will be using their card at an ATM and someone will come and quickly take the card or quickly take the money as they're trying to withdraw the money, because you can understand an elderly person is not going to be quick in order to be able to fight against a criminal. And then at the same time, at a center like this one, Mam Claire is explaining that in some of the instances, you find that young people who are actually either the grandchildren or the children of some of the elderly people would be the ones that are beating them up, taking their social grants after they've had to go and collect it. And in some instances, you find that they will then speak to some of these elderly people to say, let's go to the police and open a case. They don't want to, because for them, it is something that they feel like maybe they should resolve as a family, but also fearing victimization from some of their children who can then retaliate if they choose to do that. At the same time, some of them are put out of their homes. Others are left with grandchildren to look after them without even as much as some kind of assistance in order to be able to do that. So quite a number of issues, and we still have quite a number of elderly persons actually to speak to here at the center, because this is not the only place where they come to just to get something to eat, but it's also the place where they come in order to be able to have some kind of assistance. And we will be looking at getting some kind of even, helpful hints on how to spot an elderly person who's actually being abused. At the same time, be able to see if you are then in that kind of position, how best can you report that case to the police? And I'm going to ask if we can be able to just get a bit more of the elderly persons to come and be with us here as we ask some of them to, as they make their way out. And then we can just get a number of them as well to come in and just be able to share with us some of their stories, as they can at least give us a sense of how things are actually looking on the ground. And also, we do have some guests as well. Jose Etsile Sehularo who is a chairperson of the South African Older Persons Forum, who will also be in conversation with us, talking to us about some of the issues that they raise in Parliament as well, as far as the issues of elderly persons are concerned. What needs to change policy-wise in order to be able to at least help the elderly persons to be safer in South Africa? Also, what needs to change as far as policing is concerned, so that at least they can also be able to understand that government also needs to play a certain role, particularly at SASSA pay points, in order to be able to ensure that there is as much of security as possible. And I'm going to ask Ukoko Madita as well, as she makes her way out. We are going to be getting a bit more elderly persons who are coming into the room with us in order to be able to speak to us and paint a picture for us of how things are looking. Koko, uma sisiphetha nje wena ubona ukuthi yini mhlambe ningathi ningayithola kuma SASSA pay points mhlambe njengokuthi nivikeleke nje?
Ngibona ukuthi kungaba kuhle nabangafaka abantu bomthetho bagcwale lapha esihola khona eSquare, ngoba sihola ePick n Pay. Ene kwesisikhathi uthi uyaphuma eminyango wePick n Pay awusafiki nale mali ekhaya seyithathiwe.
Okay, Gogo, ngiyabonga kakhulu, siyabonga isikhathi sakho. Ngizocela ukuthi nje mhlawumbe ungangilindela ngaleni ukuthi abanye bake bafike nabo sizoke sizwe kubo ukuthi bona bathini, ukuthi sizwe ukuthi nabo bathini ngale ndaba yokuthi badinga usizo kangakanani. And we're going to be speaking to other elderly persons who are joining us. They're in the room next door, because this is a center where they would normally come and be able to at least get some hot meals, because some of them from home, they are not even able to get some hot meals. So if we do have a number of them, they can come in and we can just start to have this conversation with them, so that at least we can also get to hear from them what kind of changes are they hoping will be made in order for them to get an understanding also on how to protect themselves, but also what do they think needs to be done about the crime situation. Mama, siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi ube nathi, ngicela igama. Ubonge. Manibheka nina yini into mhlambe ekungukuthi ingasiza ukuthi ogogo bavikeleke kangcono as far as the crime situation is concerned around here?
Makungaqina kakhulu emaphoyiseni. Sikhala ngemaphoyisa kakhulu emaphoyisa afika sokonakele. And emaphoyisa anokuthi uma ngabe sometimes kukhona lokwenzeka ngaleso sikhathi akhona wona around, athatha isikhathi ukufikelela. Nami bengilumi bengisebenza nabe ngi-CPF. So isikhathini esiningi
manje ni-CPF yini ezinye izinto enike nazibona mhlambe manibheka izinto engathi ithinta abantu abasebekhulile makubheka isimo sobugebengu?
Hey, bantu abadala basenkingeni ngoba kakhulu kubazukulu bantwana babo straight ngabo laba ba-athekako, ba-atheka labantu abadala. Uthole ukuthi umzalo wakho sosenkingeni manje akasazi ukuthi ufanele saphile njani, imali sekufanele ahlala afihlile la afihle khona sowulibele. Baphila kabuhlungu abantu abadala, baphila kabuhlungu, nokufa bayafa babulawe bazukulu.
Mama, ngicela igama.
uDorothy Nengwane.
Masifika la uthekithi wena uhlala ukhile ngoba uyasaba usabani?
Saba bafana okweqiniso ngoba labafana asibathembi. Nalabantu bangenayo maybe umuntu ezathi uyathengisa kanti akathengisi, ufuna ukubona ukuthi unobani omunye umuntu phakathi endlini. So sihlale sikhile ngaso sonke isikhathi.
Kukhona engena kuzo ukuthi mhlambe khona abantu abangenelwayo?
Ukhona omunye umama ezonithusa sayomncwaba angenelwe endlini, umama omdala. Indaba yakhona phelele emoyeni. Sayomncwaba wabulawa. Kodwa ngazi ukuthi ubulewe abaqhashi, wani abaqhashi. Abaqhashi bayabona siyabaqhashisa la emakhaya, especially abantu bangaphandle. Uyamqhashisa umuntu awumazi ukuthi unjani. Angafuni ukukubhadala ngoba uyazi ukuthi uhlala wedwa, angafuni ukukunikeza imali yakhe. Leso sikhathi leso uyakuplanela ukuthi uzokuthola kanjani. Uyayibona into enjalo?
Sayabona Mama Siyabonga. Mum Dorothy there is talking about an elderly woman who was not far from where we are. We are at Zone 1 in Diepkloof, but that elderly woman was at Zone 2 in Diepkloof, and she was killed, and they suspect it was the tenants in some of the back rooms, because she says that that's also quite the problem, because they do rent out some of the back rooms, and they rent those rooms to, sometimes undocumented foreign nationals, and they don't know where they come from. And when they don't want to pay you, knowing that you live alone as an elderly person, you might then find yourself at risk. At the same time, listening to Umambongi speaking about the fact that the CPF is also complaining about the fact that at times the response time from the police is a problem, because they then find themselves having to deal with the situation as the first responders, but then it's too late when the police get here. And while I ask them to bring more of the elderly persons to talk to them, I'm going to speak to Josetsile Sehularo, who's the chairperson of the South African Older Persons Forum, and joining us as well now, just to also talk about the situation. We'll also be in conversation with Femada Shamam, who is the CEO of the Association for the Aged, and that is TAFTA. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time. Let me start with you, Josetsile, because one of the things that we're hearing about here is that there's pay point issues. There's also issues at home where elderly persons are concerned. Which other crimes go unreported as far as older persons are concerned?
Well, good evening, everybody. A number of crimes go unreported, but we'd also realize that some of the crimes that happen, they happen within our homes. They are within the homes where we live, where the grannies live. But what I can indicate to you that just today we had a very, very productive meeting with the responsible policing, who are responsible for visible policing and protection. The issues that have just been mentioned, we are aware of them, and we are pursuing them to say that it cannot happen that our people fall victims of crime all the time. But as we have also indicated, like I have been following, some of the issues happen because the community does not really get involved to take care, to make sure that this type of crimes are prevented.
And Femada, for you, one of the things that is quite clear is that at times it becomes difficult to spot signs of abuse, because we've heard tonight that some of the elderly persons become very secretive about what is going on, opting to try and resolve issues from home. How do we spot an elderly person who is being abused? What are the signs?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you as well about this very serious issue. So it depends on the type of abuse that the older person is experiencing. If, for example, physical abuse and emotional abuse, you'll find that older people become withdrawn. Where there is physical abuse, you will have bruises, unexplained hands that may have fractures, and the person would shy away from the normal social circumstances. We've also had situations where older people have also been sexually abused, and where you find older people attending the clinic or reaching out for health services where they have, for example, sexually transmitted diseases, that obviously will alert you that there's a problem. Where older people have their assets taken from them, their houses or whatever other assets they have, suddenly you'll find that they have far less. That's an indication that there's something that needs to be investigated. So I think that when we are working with older persons, it's important to understand what their routine is. And when you start seeing these changes, to create a space for them to be able to share what they are experiencing. That's not always easy, because in cases of abuse, very often it is a family member or someone close to them that's the perpetrator. And the older people, as much as they want the abuse to stop, they also don't want harm to come to the perpetrators, especially if it's their children and their grandchildren. They want the abuse to stop, but they don't want to be the person responsible for sending them to jail. So they're in quite a difficult situation. But I think our response to it has to be about building the trust with the older person so that they can share it, but also that there are options. There are things that can be done to keep them safe and to take them away from this abusive environment that they may find themselves in.
And Khositsile, for you, when you look at, some of the challenges, because, as you say, some of the cases go unreported and all of that, but at the same time, we even hear that in some of the cases when they are reported, the response time may just be a challenge. What needs to change?
As I've said, the relationship with the police is something that we also discussing at length to say that it's of no use that cases are reported and the police, when you expect the police to respond, we have been told that the vehicles are not available and all that, and this happens a lot. Like I've indicated that even today we did indicate that is something that must happen. We know that the resources are not abound, but if our government can try really to make sure that in as far as response time is concerned, that can be minimized to make sure that at least the safety can be assured of where crimes is reported.
So,
and of course, the other thing
before I move to Famada. Pardon me for coming in there, because right on that point, I would like us not to lose this point as well before I move to Famada. How rife nationally would you say is also the issue of, mental health challenges with the elderly sometimes being mistaken for issues around witchcraft in some of the communities, and therefore they bear the brunt. In other instances, we've seen them being, burnt alive.
That happens mainly within the rural areas where people are ignorant, where people still need to be educated, to be schooled in terms of the dementia and Alzheimer's diseases. To say that if you see an elderly behaving in a particular way, it's not that he or she is a witch. And the main thing is, of course, the very issue of having to educate our masses, our people, especially in the rural areas. It happens mainly in places like Limpopo, in KZN, and of course, even internally within places like the Free State. Such occurrences do happen, but it's also all in the question of ignorance that is there.
Famada, one of the things that you ended off with there is something that is quite concerning, and it has come up here as well, is that, as you say, the elderly people are caught between a rock and a hard place, right? And they sometimes find themselves fearing for their safety, but at the same time, they don't want to be the ones that put their own children behind bars. So how do we navigate this as family members? Because sometimes you find that one of the children in the home will actually want to put those responsible for such crimes behind bars, but you then find that an elderly person is not willing. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that we need to do is firstly educate our older people to let them know that help is available. So, just to put it out there, sometimes older people don't realize that they can reach out for help. We launched a national helpline, toll-free helpline in 2022. So older people can call through to the helpline and they can be anonymous. Sometimes they just want to be able to speak about the situation they find themselves in. In terms of situations where older people don't want harm to come to their family members, but they want the abuse to stop, there is a specific protocol that we follow in terms of the manner in which we deal with abuse of older persons. And if the person is unwilling to follow the legal route, we can support the older person to look at ways in which we can address some of the contributing factors to the abuse. Sometimes we find that the perpetrators are not intentional in their abuse. There are a number of factors that contribute to it. Sometimes it is burnout, carer stress, and as Mr. Seholaro just shared with us, sometimes it's ignorance. Some younger people don't know how to take care of an older person. Just to contextualize that for you, we're seeing an increasing number of older people. In fact, Stats SA just came out with a mid-year population estimates. Our South African society is now an aging society because we now have 10.5% of our population who are older people. That's 6.6 million older people in the country. So there's far more older people. But more than the number, people are living longer. Previously you'd find that it's unusual that people will live up to their late 60s or 70s. But now it's quite common that people are living in their 90s and even some turning 100. What does that mean? Society are not aware of what the care needs are and haven't prepared appropriately for it. So in terms of how do we support older people who are in situations, we need to look at building up the networks of care. So work with the alleged perpetrators, try and find out ways in which you can build capacity so that they know what they're doing is wrong. Because sometimes it is pure ignorance that we find the situation escalating further.
Let me thank you both for your time. Really quite helpful insights. Pardon me, Khositsile?
I wanted to come in, if possible, in terms of issues that actually contribute as well. Because we have referred to ignorance as one of the contributors. But the economic situation where unemployment is also one of the major issues, especially where it leads to drug abuse within the communities. Now you find that this drug addicts, while they do that, they prey on the elderly because they are easy targets to rob them of their meager pensions and so on. So the issue of unemployment, the economic situation, does by and large also contribute to the situation that we find ourselves in, where the elderly people are easy targets.
And I'm going to ask them about that because I do have another group of elderly people here. But thank you so much for talking to us. That was Khositsile Sihularo, who's the chairperson of the South African Older Persons Forum. Femada Shimam, who is the CEO of the Association for the Aged. And we stay with us, right? And we take you to Limpopo, where some elderly women in Zaiplas in Sekhukhune say they feel unsafe in their homes. This is due to crime. And they were speaking at a celebration to honor a 102-year-old woman who unfortunately they say was raped last year, and a 27-year-old man has been arrested on the same day and will then be sentenced at the Groblersdal Magistrates Court. This will happen on the 27th of this month. All right. We do apologize for bringing you that story again. So we will bring you the story of the elderly women in Sekhukhune in Zaiplas who say that they're feeling unsafe due to crime a little later on as we continue our conversation. But right now, I do have more of the elderly persons around this particular area of Diepkloof Zone 1, just to talk to them about some of the issues. I'm going to start with you, Gok. Okay. Gokled, ngizocela ukuthi siqale ngokukhuluma ukuthi ngoba ngiqeda ukukhuluma nabantu abakhuluma ngedakamizwa ukuthi ngathi ziyahlupha kakhulu nasekuthenini nesimo sobugebengu sithi ukukhuphuka.
Hayi dakamizwa zona hayi ziyalibulaliswa. Ngoba uthola ukuthi abantwana abancane kufanele ukuthi bangabe basesikolweni, uthola ukuthi baselokishini babhizi ngedakamizwa. And mase sebezidla le dakamizwa lezi siyaba control abasakhona ukwenza lezi zinto kumele bazenze. Even nasemakhaya basalaleli, balala labathanda khona, badla whatever, mabahlangana nento eyimali bayathatha. Bahamba bayothenga idakamizwa ngoba abasakwazi ukuhlala nazo. Kusho ukuthi nje sezibangenile egasini.
Wena Gogo, uma ubheka isimo sobugebengu la ukhona sinjani?
Isona sometimes siba sibi. Yeah, ngoba esikhathini esiningi isikhathi asizizwa ukuthi zenzeke kuphi. Kodwa mase sezizwe kakhulukazi mawuye lapha eSquare kulazi bonakala khona kakhulu. Ngoba uthola ukuthi eSquare bayatshontsha bababambe basese babambile sebabashaya nakhona sobazwela ubuhlungu ngoba manje yazi sobazwela ubuhlungu nje abasakwazi nokuthi bathi bayazikhulumela ngoba ngasesikhathi sabayabashaya.
Mama ninjani?
Ngiyaphila kunjani?
Siyaphila mangicela usitshela igama nokuthi wena njengomuntu owumhlali wala ekhaya isimo sobugebengu ngapha uma ubheka futhi kakhulukazi ebantwini abadala sinjani?
Igama lami nguthokozile Mathunywa ngihlala khona la eZonwane. Isimo sobugebengu sona sandile kakhulu ngoba sileso esibulala umoya nenhliziyo uma sizizwa kakhulu kule ndawo esikuyo lo nathi nje siyasaba nje ukuphuma uphuma wazi ukuthi kufanele ulayele ukuthi uyaphuma ngoba manje noma ungathi uyapi ubhekiwe noma ngathi ini ubhekiwe ubugebengu ubona buningi benzakala kakhulu futhi emini kuba whereby uthola ukuthi umuntu omdala nje uyarojwa uyarejwa yazi ezinye noma sizizwa ema-TV kodwa ke nazo ziyilezo ezingenelelayo kakhulu ukuthi thina ngabe siphephe kangakanani thina abantu abadala.
Gogo ngizocela ukuzwa kuwe ukuthi wena usibona sinjani isimo sobugebengu ikakhulukazi kini abantu abangathi sebekhulile.
Hayi sihlangile isigebengu isimo sobugebengu siyaphambili khona manje besandulungisa ihonda lapha ekhaya yahamba ibetri ebusuku sangazazi ukuthi ithatha ubani kanjani nini njengoba sisho nje sesiyenqane emini nasebusuku yaphana. Ubugebengu bona buhlangile ngenxa yedakamizwa esingatholakala ukuthi nabantu bazenzela umathanda nawuphuma ufanele ucabanga ukuthi ngizophuma ngihambe yakuphelezela umntwana ojike khona ngendaba ukuthi ubugebengu buhlangile bona yambili ipetrol umntana akusinyanga zingakhi.
Gogo wena ubugebengu ubona bunjani niphephile ningabantu abadala la kule ndawo?
Asiphanga kakhulu ayi ubugebengu budlangile kakhulu manje west nami nje bangibamba lapha eSquare kepha mina ngibanjwa amantombazana ngangena nje ngadideka bangifaka emotweni ngithatha umama ngiphunga ithi ngiye ebhenki uyangikhipha nje ukuthi hey nangu bakubiza lapha ngithi hayi wayibangibiza nami ngadomeka ngangena emotweni ngithola abahleli labantu laba bagqoka ama-coat bazivalile ngama-maski baphethe khona le nto abayenzayo bathi bascream and then ukhona ubaba wakhona usidudla udriver uzivala ubuso ngingene bathi hayi mama ngithi mina wayiningibiza bathi hayi mama uyazini sisebenza ngokuthi sifuna ukunipha ama-voucher ngoba nayi i-Pick n Pay la iduze sifuna ukunipha ama-voucher manje sifuna ukuthi nawa amanamba khetha amanamba owafunayo. Hey umkholo wonke wesasa umkholo wesasa ngadomeka nje ukuthi bathi ngithathela amanamba ngathatha amanamba bathe mama wine 5,000 bathi uzokwenzani ngale mali ngathi hayi sengiyothangela abantwana into zesikolo mase siphuma ngithi mina ke mabanginike le voucher ngoba nayi i-Pick n Pay bathi hayi ngoba le mali ningi angeke sikunike sizoyisa ekhaya.
Manje gogo amaphoyisa akusiza babanjiwe
bokungana amaphoyisa bokungana amaphoyisa lapha yana bathi kimi sizayisa ekhaya imali ngoba ngeke uyikhona igroza ukuyibamba ngithi mina ngoba inamba aniyazi bathi hayi siscreamile la besiyenza lapha ngithi njengoba besenza sichaya kusho ukuthi ilenti igroza izoza bathathe konke yazi ngadomeka enye into ikhathi lami lesasa kona angizange ngahola yazi angizange ngahola.
Phephisa gogo uyeza ukuthi uza kwenu uthi uthathelwe imali kunjani izalukazi ziyathathelwa gogo? Izalukazi ziyathathelwa imali maziyohola?
Abazithathela mina bakangithathela impela yiyo nje lo mkhuba ukuthi thatha isilele nje ekuseni umfana uyavuka emsebenzini ngemoto ibhetri seyihambile.
These are some of the elderly people who are saying here, just a quick roundup of what they said, right? They talk about the issue of crime and the fact that things are quite bad, it's rife. And Umama on the corner speaks about how she was robbed when she had actually gone to the ATM to withdraw money using her SASA card. And she says it was young women who called her to a car, and as they lured her to a car, they then told her that she's going to get a voucher of some sort and be winning something. But unfortunately, they went off with all her social grant money. At the same time, then you listen to some harrowing stories that speak about the shopping center that I was talking about, which is behind us, that, you know, where there's also the issues of security, but also the issues of drugs. They say that are quite rife and really also exacerbating what they're also seeing. So let's take you back to this insert, right, which is in Limpopo at Zyplus in Sikukune, where there were elderly women who were celebrating with a woman who had turned 100, but also, unfortunately, she was raped, and we are expecting that the suspect is going to be sentenced later this month.
The fragile centenarian survived the brutal attack which occurred while she slept alone inside her home. The incident left her shaken as she now lives with a mental condition, dementia. Her family says a family member who rescued her managed to identify the perpetrator. My mother was alone when she was violated. On that day, we were not home at night. She told us that she heard the door opening. She screamed, but the intruder overcame her, then raped her. She managed to let out another scream. It is then that her loud screams were heard by one of our family members who was close at the time. Then he ran into the house. The suspect then fled on foot. He tried to chase him, but he vanished. Elderly women at Zyplus village are worried about their safety. They say they are afraid that they may be victimized by young men who roam the streets at night. In some cases, the elderly women say they are robbed of their social grant money.
They attacked us elderly people knowing that we can't fight back. We are not safe. We always fear for our lives. Imagine after getting a grant, they come and order you to give them all the money. We live in fear. The young boys take what they want. The perpetrators are arrested and then released. Why are they released? They must not come back. We don't know what is happening here.
In the meantime, a 27-year-old man was arrested in July last year. Limpopo Premier Poppy Ramathuba addressed the elderly women in the village about government interventions.
We need to set the example, and we are hoping that the conviction which will be successful, and we are hoping that he will be sentenced to many lives in prison, because that will set a message to any of these boys who do not see the granny as their grannies, but see them as potential victims for them to can prey on them.
Meanwhile, police say 12 serious crimes perpetrated against women and children were reported in the province since the beginning of August.
We are saddened by the murders of the women that we have picked up in the province. At this point in time, plus or minus 12 women has been killed since the beginning of August month. We have teams that we have established. We have put some experts together. We also had a team assisted by the national last week that were in the province working on some of the cases that are difficult. We have arrested a serial rapist. It has been undergoing the court. We are looking at another serial rapist that we are picking up in the district of Vembe.
The accused, Sifiso Johannes Mahlangu, is expected to be sentenced next week on the 27th of August at the Groblersdal Magistrates Court. Katla Khonyoni, SABC News, Zyplus in Limpopo.
A very disturbing report there by Gatle Khonyoni. And as we end off our discussion, do not be alarmed if you see a number of the elderly persons making their way inside. We are starting to wind down and wrap up our broadcast. But let's now speak to Tshepo Nkosi, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the Johannesburg District Community Police Board. Mr. Nkosi, thank you so much for your time. Let's just start firstly with talking about, tonight we heard from different elderly persons who are telling us that crime is rife. They need to at least start to see a bit more movement as far as security is concerned.
Yeah, evening. True, we cannot run away from saying the crime is high, but we are doing all that we can. We're doing our best. We say all hands on deck. You have the police, you have your community patrollers, you have private security that has been called to come on board. So everybody is trying to do their best to make sure that we fight this crime, especially for our elderly people.
How much of a challenge is the issue of drugs as well? Because it has come up here that in some instances you find that their children might be on drugs, grandchildren, and they take some of their SASSA cards and don't bring them back, and then they find themselves actually without even their pension, their social grant money.
No, that's true. In fact, the abuse that the elderly face most of the time is the abuse that comes from the houses, indoors, whereby the grandchildren are the ones that are more abusive to the elderly, especially those who are in drugs. It's one of the problems that we cannot run away from. But then the challenge that we get also is that the very elderly, again, have pity on these grandchildren, when they're supposed to be arrested. Is there who says, yo, wanaka, and that's where we get another problem, whereby they can't voice out, and then the abuse continues.
And do you find that the police are able to respond to that, and what needs to change? Because it has come up quite a lot, what you're talking about, because I think we do need to educate our elderly persons, but also at the same time, what needs to change from a policing point of view in order to say that in some of the cases, ignore what the elderly person is saying and actually do arrest the perpetrator so that they don't continue to be abused?
Look, if ever the problem continues, I think the police get to a point whereby they take action, Hence, you find the elderly desk at the police station that looks and monitor such issues, whereby the social side of the police, they visit the elderlies and see what is happening. If ever an elderly person must be moved from that environment to a safer environment, they do that. And it's what is happening. So there are programs that are put in place that are helping the elderly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what about the police? Is the response time okay? Because in some of the cases, some people here were complaining about the police response time, particularly the CPF, to say that sometimes when the police get here, it's too late and the crime has already happened and now they can't even find the perpetrator.
Look, we cannot run away from saying that there is a challenge, in terms of the response time. But we always say they must do better. Hence, the government tried to introduce programs like the brigades, the TPV brigades. They're the ones that are full soldiers. They're always on the ground. And they're able then to respond and call for help quicker, before things get out of hand. So in terms of the response, we can never run away from it. It's something that we need to look into, but we need to fix it. But I know they're trying their level best.
Mr. Nkosi, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. That is Mr. Tshepo Nkosi, the Deputy Chairperson of the Johannesburg District Community Police Forum. That's how we wrap up our conversation this evening with the elderly people here. Just as a reminder to South Africans, these are not just, older persons. They would have taken care of their children at some point. They would have taken off their grandchildren. But at the same time, they also now are at a stage in their lives where they need care. And it is not, fair that a nation is actually going to abuse its elderly, that they become at the receiving end of crime. But one hopes that from the conversations that we would have had here on the show to cast the spotlight on an issue that is sometimes not much talked about, certainly hope that this evening you were able to at least get a glimpse into the lives of the elderly. From us here in Diepkloof in Soweto at the Thusalushaka home, we do appreciate you watching. It's back to you in studio.